Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 520. No, sorry, I put the wrong thing here. Right, so 1, 2, 3. Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 530. It's going to be a discussion between me and my great co-host, Adrian, and we're going to be discussing all things email, the different types of email, the different type of services that will send your email. We'll be covering the whole world of email, me and Adrian. And I'm just going to introduce my great co-host. Adrian, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Hi, everyone. My name is Adrian. I am the CEO and founder of Groundhog. We help small businesses that use their WordPress launch their funnel, grow their list, and scale their business with proven digital marketing and automation tools.
And I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We build courses for entrepreneurs, for educational institutes. If you're into courses, we build, support, maintain, and host your learning management system with the full package which you can get at WP-Tonic. Before we go into the main part of the show, I also want to talk about one of our great sponsors, and that's Kinsta. They've been sponsoring the show for over 3 years now. I use Kinsta for the WP-Tonic main website for the past couple of years. Fantastic service. If you're looking for a premier WordPress hosting provider for yourself or for your clients, for WooCommerce or for a course-based website, I can't highly recommend Kinsta enough to you. You get Google technology, plus a fantastic custom interface, fantastic support, and all the technology bells and whistles that you're looking for, not only for your own websites, for your client websites. So go over, have a look at what Kinsta has to offer. If you decide to buy for yourself or for your clients, also tell Kinsta that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show, and their ongoing support over the few years has been much welcomed. So, Adrian, how do we start the discussion about all things email?
So I suppose we can start off with talking about the different kinds of email that's out there. For anyone who doesn't know, I run an email marketing company. That's really what we specialize in, is we help, or we provide tools that help small businesses communicate with their customers through email and SMS as well, but mainly email. So over the last 8 years, I've been in this industry. Yeah, 8 years now, because I was like in Infusionsoft for 5, and then we're going on 3 at Groundhog here. So yeah, just about 8 years I've been in this industry. I've learned a few things about good email practices and bad email practices. So I'm going to start the conversation off with the fact that there's 3 kinds of email in the world. So the first kind of email out there is the one that people who have been around longer than myself are pretty familiar with, back when email was first invented, and that's the personal email. Yeah. So that's, person A sending an email that says, "How are you?" to person B. Maybe they're trying to book a meeting. Maybe they just want to catch up. Maybe they just want to follow up on something. Email is something that a lot of us use every single day. We use Gmail, we use Outlook, we use Office 365, and those are the clients that we use in order to manage our personal emails. So sending one-off emails from person A to person B. So that's the first kind of email that exists.
And that is subdivided into 2 areas. You got the area like you got Gmail, so it'll be Jonathan Denwood at gmail.com, and you got Yahoo, and then you got for a business, you'd be highly recommended to have your email linked to your domain, so Jonathan at WPTonic.com, haven't you?
Yeah, so you can use email clients like Google, Outlook, Office 365, Yahoo, or there's open source clients out there that you can use for your personal email, which is hosted with cPanel or WPHM or just on your server, right? So, and you can create personal email accounts through those. So you have essentially, but those are all wrapped up under what we call personal email. The next kind of email is we have something that we call transactional email. Now, transactional email is often confused with promotional email, which is the third category, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Transactional email are emails that are for commercial purposes, but are not promoting or requesting that you take any sort of action. So transactional emails could qualify as password reset requests. So if you use WordPress, you've probably reset your password a couple times. When you receive that password reset request, that is a commercial purpose email, and it is a transactional email because it's something that you specifically requested. Now, other kinds of emails, billing reminders. So if you have some sort of subscription with a company and you receive a billing reminder that says, hey, your subscription is about to renew, that's a transactional email. If you have an email that goes out to say, let's say, confirm your email address after you sign up for a new account, that is a transactional email as well. And these are often confused with what I'm going to categorize in the third category as promotional emails. So transactional emails don't have the same requirements as promotional emails. For example, they don't need, for example, the unsubscribe link. They don't need all of the compliance and stuff and information, and they don't necessarily need to abide by Castle GDPR because they're emails that are specifically sent for the sole purpose of providing a specific set of information that the customer requested or is required by law. Password reset, billing reminders, account completion stuff, et cetera, et cetera. The third category is the promotional email. So that is when you set a broadcast to your entire list of 10,000 people that says, we have a sale going on right now, and you need to click this link to go buy and get 20% off or whatever. That's not a transactional email. That is a promotional email. That's the stuff that goes into the promotions folder on Gmail. And it's really important that the distinction is made between that kind of email and transactional and personal. Because lately I've been getting a lot of people coming on into the community and they're confused about why we're saying that they can't use Gmail, Office 365, or Outlook to deliver their transactional and promotional emails.
Well, it's not only that, it's also, like I said in my advert for Kinsta don't provide email services, but there's a lot of other hosting providers where you can utilize the email functionality of your hosting provider, but you would be highly advised not to, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. And
can you explain why you shouldn't do that?
So the issue, and I'm just gonna clarify the issue. So the issue is that if you're using an open source tool like Groundhog in order to send emails, you can set it up in a way that it uses maybe G Suite or Office 365 or Outlook or your hosting's email service as your transactional and promotional email provider, even though those are technically the same things that you would use as your personal email providers, because that's really what the hosting email service is for. It's so you can use the webmail client in order to manage your personal emails between person A and person B, which is the first category of email. The reason why this is a problem is because if you confuse the types of email senders which are authorized in order to manage transactional and promotional email on your behalf with your personal email senders, you are going to end up getting your domain, your IP, your email blacklisted, spam folders, just lots of nasty, nasty stuff. I had a conversation with a new client recently, and they are setting up SMTP, their SMTP connection with their website through Office 365. And after every step of the conversation, I tacked on to my support ticket with them. It's like, I highly recommend that you do not pursue this line of inquiry and you switch to a dedicated transactional service. And his response to that was, why should I do that? Because if I'm using a personal email service, I'm going to not, end up in spam folders because it's technically personal email. And maybe that would have worked 5, 6, 7 years ago. But here's the problem with that. Email clients, Gmail, Outlook, Office 365, Yahoo are very smart. They're not dumb. Maybe at one point in time they were dumb and they didn't know how to compare literally billions of emails sent per day, viewing open rates, click-through rates, and discussing between each other which senders are authorized and which senders have poor or good domain reputation. So picture this. You send a transactional or promotional email to a list of 10,000 people through Office 365, which is a personal email service provider. It is not designed and was never designed to handle promotional and transactional email. Google or Gmail, let's say you send it out to a Gmail address, let's say adrian.toby@gmail.com, for example. I receive that email, or rather Gmail receives that email, and they see a couple things about it. Number one, they see that it has an unsubscribe link, tons of links in it. It's formatted HTML, which most personal emails are not, or at least they have minimal HTML in them. And they're able to decide or to confirm to themselves that this is probably a promotional email, or, in better case, a transactional email of some kind. Because Google can tell. That's why they have the promotions and the updates folder, because they can tell what's promotional, what's transactional, and what's personal. That's why they have those different folders, because they know. So that's going to then do something. They're going to be able to tell what kind of email it is purely based on the content, but then they're going to check where it's actually coming from. Now, since Office 365, Outlook, Gmail, etc., are all personal email clients, not dedicated to sending transactional promotional email, they're going to say this person's probably a spammer because they're using a free service, or maybe it's paid service. It depends on your plan, but they're using a personal service in order to send transactional promotional emails. So they're probably spam. So you end up in spam. They notify you, whatever your service provider is, Outlook or Office 365, Gmail, etc. And then your account gets, suspended and your IP address is put on a blacklist. And then, yeah, it's just not good.
You find that gradually a lot of your personal email isn't.
And that's when your personal email,
spam and other things, and it gets flaky, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if your transactional email using Office 365 or Outlook starts getting those spam complaints, because you can mark emails as spam, you can mark emails as bounce or whatever. So once that starts happening, that's when your personal email addresses no longer hit the mark, because you're using a personal sending email service in order to deliver your transactional email. That's going to adversely affect your personal emails as well. If that IP reputation goes down and your domain reputation goes down because of sending those emails through your personal email service, then your personal emails that you actually are trying to send are no longer going to hit the mark either. And that's no good. You don't want that, because if you're trying to, follow up with someone, let's say a potential customer, and they're not able to see your emails because guess what? They're all bouncing or your domain was blocked, then that sale goes out the window, and then you're basically start from square one, where you have to go out and then find a new email sender. So it's super important that the distinction between the types of email out there, personal, transactional, and promotional, there are different sending services for those three different kinds of email. And when you're setting up your email marketing and your business, you have to be aware that you are responsible for knowing this and going out and procuring licenses and subscriptions with various different companies in order to have the different services for the different kinds of email. Now, most of the time, you are totally able to bundle promotional and transactional email into the same service. That's usually a non-issue because depending on the type of email that you send, it's, you don't really have to worry about it all too much. Although you can separate transactional promotional out into different accounts as well. So what kind of email services exist out there in order to actually enable you to send all three kinds of?
Well, we covered that in the second half, Adrian. It's amazing, and we're coming up to 15 minutes. It goes quick. So we're going to be covering that in the second half of the show with Adrian, who really does know what he's talking about. We'll be back in a few moments. Email.
Are we doing the sponsors today?
Pardon?
Are we doing the sponsors today?
Yes, I'm going to do your sponsorship, Adrian. I'm just saying that email, one of the older technologies, but still totally crucial. And what we're discussing does cause a lot of confusion. And I thought Adrian was the right person to discuss it with. So before we go into the main part, the second half, I want to talk about Groundhog. You know, Groundhog it's just a fantastic product. I've been so happy that it came on the market, and we actively use it at WP-Tonic for our clients. And basically, it's a native CRM system, marketing automation. Been looking for a really rock solid product like Groundhog for a number of years, and then Adrian and his team came on the market. It's been growing for the past year. I highly recommend it to you, listeners and viewers, if you're looking for your clients or for yourself a native CRM system that really works and has an intuitive and easy to use interface. Go over to Groundhog. They have a free product as well, which you can try out the system and then buy one of their packages, which is also great value. So like I say, go over to Groundhog, have a look what they've got to offer, and buy one of their packages. So before I rudely interrupted you, Adrian, you were just about, I think, to talk about the
different kinds of services for the different kinds of email out there. So most of us are familiar with marketing automation and CRM by this point, because that's what Groundhog does. There are other providers out there as well. There's like ActiveCampaign, Infusionsoft, HubSpot, Salesforce, Marketo, ConvertKit, MailLaunch. There's so many.
Can I ask a question
providers
before we go into that? The transactional email you can use for, because I know you got your own service, Mailhawk, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then you've got like services like SendGrid, and there's a couple others. What do they actually do?
So I'm gonna get to that. It's part of my upcoming spiel.
All right.
So for the promotional email category, whatever you're using to manage your promotional emails will generally have a sending service in order to manage that. So if you're using, let's say, ActiveCampaign or Infusionsoft, they have their own servers and their own email services in order to ensure that promotional email successfully reaches the inbox without negatively affecting your domain and IP reputation, because they're using their own IP address in order to authorize the transaction of said email. So if you're using those kinds of services, like and MailChimp, again, another example, they are taking care of your promotional emails so that you do not have to route that through your own email sending service. So hopefully that makes sense. So typically, if you're using that, you're good. On the other hand, if you are, say, using an open source alternative like Groundhog or maybe something like Mautic, or another WordPress CRM, or you're just trying to send an email from your WordPress site, then you are responsible for getting an actual transactional / promotional email service on your own that doesn't come bundled. So you actually have to go direct to the providers. Now, this is when it gets a little bit in the weeds, because when you load up WordPress on a lot of hosts, email just comes with it. And you think, I don't need to worry about email because it's just included. That's not necessarily the case, because again, the service that's usually included with the hosting is a personal email service, and it's usually on a shared hosting account. So that means you and 1,000 other websites are sharing the same IP address to send emails. So their usage of that email can directly impact your sending ability. And conversely, you can totally tank a server's IP address by using your website in order to send lots of email. So no good, all in all. This is when you would go find services like Mailhawk, which is a transactional / promotional email service that I am part of. We specialize in delivering WordPress email, password reset notifications, WooCommerce, billing orders, and anything that comes out of Groundhog, for example, is something that Mailhawk would be available to send on your behalf. We have our own IP addresses. We have our own reputation management systems. We have all of that stuff. So we do all of like the white label handling of email for you. And then the only thing that you're concerned about is connecting it to your website and verifying that we are able to send email on your behalf through various DNS settings and adding a couple of records to your DNS setup. Other providers that are notable, if you're using SendGrid, very, very, very popular option for both transactional and promotional emails. We have a very good integration with SendGrid and Groundhog. And it's usually going through a transactional email provider is much cheaper than going through a CRM directly. For example, if you're using Groundhog and SendGrid, then your investment is whatever the yearly license fee is for Groundhog, like $480. And then you're paying around $14 a month with SendGrid to send up to 40,000 emails per month, or 14, yeah, no, it is 40. It's 40,000 emails per month, which is a lot more than you'd usually get for the same value on, let's say, a SaaS-based email marketing provider, for example, MailChimp or ActiveCampaign. So there's also, you can go through Amazon Web Services. They have their own email sending service as well. It's called Simple Email Service. Pretty simple. You can set that up with Groundhog, and we help broker that a lot. And it's 1,000 emails for something like 10 cents. It's 10 cents per 1,000 email rated usage. So there's no monthly fee associated with that. It's just you pay for what you use. So that's also an incredibly popular option as well. And the reason you need SendGrid, Mailhawk, or AWS is because you are essentially offloading the responsibility of getting your email to the inbox to those persons. So they handle all of the IP reputation, they handle the domain reputation, they handle the spam, they handle the blacklist, they handle everything on your behalf so you don't have to. And so that your personal emails that you're using with Outlook, Office 365, or Gmail or Yahoo continue to reach that person's inbox. Because again, if you are relying on your personal email to send transactional promotional emails, if those start bouncing or getting marked as spam, you can be damn sure that your personal emails will suffer the consequences as well. Now, if you're using a transactional email service and guess what, your emails bounce or they get marked as spam or people complain or whatever, that interaction will not negatively affect your personal emails because it's a different service taking care of it, even though it's technically the same domain name. So this is how you separate those emails, protect yourself, because that's super important. And that's why using personal email services for promotional and transactional emails from your WordPress website, from Groundhog or anything, is no bueno, not a good idea.
How do these different services handle different levels of your email being marked as spam? You know, I would imagine I would imagine that's a complicated question because I would imagine they have all different ways of dealing with how much, you know, what a level of spam is acceptable and when it isn't, and they start approaching the sender that's utilizing their service, don't they? So,
okay, well, I'll start off with the customer to service relationship. So when you sign up for something like SendGrid, for example, you sign up for a plan, you have support, you have 40,000 emails per month that you can send out. For them to be able to broker the transaction of you sending an email and them delivering to the client, you also have to agree to a couple things. Number one, they will not tolerate spammers. So if your sole purpose is to send people scammy emails and send spam that people don't want, by the way, the definition of spam is whatever the customer thinks it is. So as soon as your emails start getting marked as spam in the inbox, which they get notified of, by the way, because there's backdoor reputation management systems that we had to set up for Mailhawk, for example, to communicate with Office 365, Gmail, and Outlook to be able to say, when you click that spam button, we get notified. And if that starts to happen, you have a threshold. Let's say it's 3%. So if 3% of your emails are marked as spam, they're going to deactivate your account. And then you have to go through a reputation reclamation process, which means that you have to fill out a survey being like, this is why it wasn't spam. This is why people marked it as spam. We're not going to do it again. We're really, really sorry. Please reactivate our account, is basically the reputation reclamation process. And most senders have this. So AWS has this process. I remember, so this was actually a mistake back in the early days. We loaded up a list of fake email addresses that we generated that we were using for testing, just on a localhost site while we were testing some stress load. And we accidentally used our live API credentials to actually send a bunch of emails to those fake email addresses. And what happened? Guess what? Like 80 to 90% of them returned as bounces. And the bounce threshold on AWS is like 1%. So immediately, like, our account got shut down, and I had to jump on support, and I had to go through, here's what happened here. Here's why we're not going to do it again. Here are the steps that we've taken to make sure that this doesn't happen, so that your IP reputation doesn't go down in the future. And we had to go through that process. That was a mistake we made a couple years ago. But yeah, that's how senders, so SendGrid, AWS, and ourselves, Mailhawk, protect our overall user's IP reputation. If we see that someone is kind of getting out of line, we cancel it, and then they have to go through and explain their process and say here's why you should reactivate my account. They usually have thresholds. And on the flip side, so let's talk about the relationship between the transactional email senders. So if I'm SendGrid or Mailhawk or AWS, what's the relationship between them and the email clients, right? Because that's a different relationship. So the email senders, if you're familiar with Stripe or PayPal, what are those? Those are payment gateways. So Stripe and PayPal simply broker the transaction. They're a middleman between whoever's credit card, right, and the business's bank account. They're just middlemen. SendGrid, AWS, Mailhawk are all essentially also middlemen. They broker the transaction between getting the email from your business to that person's inbox, to your customer's inbox, which means that they need to maintain relationships on both sides. Middlemen need to maintain relationships. So they have a relationship with the customer, which I just talked about. It's a very, very one-sided relationship. The customer pays money and has to maintain, below certain thresholds in order to be able to allow to use the service. And then the transactional email service has to maintain relationships with all of the blacklist providers, as well as all of the personal email clients, the big boys: Gmail, Outlook, Office 365, and Yahoo. And they had to develop relationships and essentially pay a lot of money to maintain those relationships in order to make sure that their IP addresses don't end up on blacklists and are blocked, and that they continue to get through to those personal inboxes, right? A lot of businesses that use Office 365, for example, have pretty strict firewall protection in order to block anything but purely transactional and personal email. So no promotional email even ends up in the spam folder. It just gets rejected. And they're constantly fighting with whoever's in charge of the email reputation gods over at Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo to say, hey, listen, we're doing all of these things to make sure that our customers are sending good email. So you should let our customers' good email get through to the inbox. And that is the relationship that's happening on that end. So there's actually a lot of personal communication going on between the email senders and the email clients in order to say, we need you to start delivering these emails or else our business is going to falter, and then our customers' business is going to falter because they're not able to deliver on their promises. Right. So that's how that kind of relationship works.
Well, we're coming up to the half-hour mark. Are you okay to stay on for another 10, 15 minutes for bonus? And I'll be asking some questions of Adrian about Groundhog, about setting up a native system the best way, and also talking about some of the SaaS systems as well, and the things you need to know if you come to choosing the right service for your particular needs and setup. So Adrian, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and Mailhawk? Groundhog, sorry, Mailhawk. Groundhog.
Oh, you can find more about Mailhawk, Groundhog at groundhog.io. You can pick up our free promotional and transactional email product, Groundhog, which is a free CRM and marketing automation plugin for WordPress. So you can pick that up at groundhog.io. Instructions to get started with Mailhawk are embedded in the plugin itself. Mailhawk will allow you to send promotional and transactional emails directly from your WordPress website with minimal hassle.
That's great. And if you want to really support the show, go over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. pardon me. I'm going to be putting up more kind of training, educational videos up on the channel, but it's already got over, I think, almost 520, 530 videos on the channel with a mixture about all sorts of subjects, topics around WordPress and online marketing. So you can really feast out if you go over to the WP-Tonic YouTube channel and subscribe for us and also give us some feedback. That would be fantastic. We'll be back next week with either an internal discussion between me and Adrian around the world of marketing automation and email, or we'll have a great guest. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. Right, so I wanted to. I don't know. Do you want to finish what you were saying before we had to wrap up the podcast, or is it okay?
I was pretty much done.
Right. Now, if I want to talk about running a native CRM. I think honestly, Groundhog is the best on the market at the present moment, and hopefully it will continue to be. But what are some of the things you need to understand to get the best experience about running a native CRM? What are some of the things you need to know that's going to assist you if you've been running it on a kind of SaaS platform, but you looked at it and you want to run a native CRM system? What are some of the things that will make it the experience the best it should be?
Well, psychologically, you can help yourself out by acknowledging that things cost money and you have to be prepared to invest, right? You have to be prepared to invest in the proper tools and the proper services in order to enable you to save money using tools like Groundhog and Mailhawk and SendGrid, etc. Your overall investment over the course of a year is, if you multiply 14 by 12 and then you factor in the cost of like a Groundhog license, your overall yearly cost is still well under $600-$700, right? Versus if you're setting up something like ActiveCampaign or Infusionsoft, you can get to $700 within a few months. So that's something that you have to be aware of, is that even though the investment is much lesser than SaaS, it's not like it's not free, right? You still have to be willing to invest, and you have to be willing to take the time to set up the appropriate tools. One of the other things is, like, SaaS is a lot more out of the box. Groundhog makes it as easy as humanly possible to set up your own self-hosted CRM, but there are still setup steps, so you have to be willing to, of course, go through that process and take the time that it takes in order to set it up correctly. In terms of what actually makes the best setup in terms of hosting your own CRM locally on a WordPress website, well, first of all, you can't run any WordPress website on $3 a month hosting. It's just or any scalable or like high traffic website. I mean, if you're just hosting your portfolio of work done because you're looking for a job and you just want to be able to send employers to your online portfolio, then you can get away with $3 a month hosting. But if you're a business, you need to be okay with spending $30, $40 a month on hosting. Our bill is well above $100 a month for all of our various digital assets, which still isn't like that much in the grand scheme of things in comparison to the types of stuff that we host. We have our website, we have our e-commerce, we have Groundhog, we have our academy, we have our template library, we have lots of digital assets. So our hosting bill is well over $100 a month, and you need to, as a business, it's like spend money to make money, right?
Yeah, you got to keep your costs in reason, but that's not one of the places where you want to skimp skimp on. So you seem to be saying that you need a decent hosting package.
You need a decent hosting package with a reputable WordPress hosting company. Cloudways, Clost, Kinsta, WP Engine, Pagely are all kind of like brand names that are in the higher echelon of WordPress hosting. You want to avoid things like GoDaddy. Their infrastructure is quite old and quite antiquated and is not up to snuff, in my personal opinion, for hosting highly dynamic websites. Again, if you're looking at just
Well,
hosting your
we don't have to
portfolio,
be
it's not
we
that
don't
bad.
have to be negative, do we? We've named some of the better ones we think. So the hosting. Anything else that will help the experience be the best, or is it mostly around the hosting?
So hosting, super important. You want good hosting with a good reputable WordPress hosting company. Liquid Web is another good one. I want to throw their
Yeah.
name in there. Liquid Web. They recently introduced some awesome cloud hosting options as well. So Kinsta, CloudWeb, WP Engine, Pagely, Cloudways, Clost, which is a Google option provider, which is actually what we use. All good options.
Can the caching, because obviously, something that I discussed with Chris and with clients, caching problems can affect learning management systems in various ways if it's not applied correctly. Can that also affect your system as well?
Yes, it can. Not as terribly, I should say, or not as drastically. The very, very minimal parts of Groundhog are actually customer facing. Really, the only things are the forms and the customer preferences area. So where they click unsubscribe and stuff like that, that would experience problems if you're caching. But there are easy ways to exclude that. So if you have like a huge traffic load and you want to implement caching, you can do it. We use caching on our website, and we just have certain areas of the website excluded for dynamic content. The only thing that is like super problematic is if you have stuff like object redis caching, which is a bit techy. But certain signs of database caching can really negatively affect dynamic websites, whether it's Groundhog or WooCommerce or Lifter or any of that stuff. If it's dynamic, it's problematic. So you want to make sure that at the very most, you're doing front-end caching and you're leaving kind of like your database caching alone. Because if you have highly dynamic websites and it's cached, then that means that your customers are always seeing content that's probably hours old. This is an issue that affects BuddyBoss a lot, as people enable object and database caching. And then they're like, why is the stuff on my wall like 7 hours old and I'm not seeing new posts show up? And it's like, well, because you have this caching stuff enabled. So that's a no-go if you want to have dynamic websites. But that's kind of just like, that's why you need a good hosting package, right? Because caching really exists in order to make up for what hosts lack in speed and processing power. So if you have a decent host with a decent backend infrastructure, then the need for caching becomes lessened, right? And as long as your front end is fast with browser caching and Cloudflare and correct DNS settings and stuff like that, then you're pretty much good to go. Our website, huge. We have a huge website. Load speed under a second, right? With caching enabled.
What about Crone? Because, first of all, explain what Crone is, maybe to the listeners' viewers. My understanding it's a kind of PHP thing that is at the heart of time. Measuring time, measuring when things are going to show up, be sent out. So I would imagine it has some crucial element of how your system works or doesn't.
Yes. So cron is a service that is how WordPress tells when things need to happen. So in the back end, what we do is we schedule events to send out, emails. In core WordPress, you can, when you're scheduling posts to be published at a certain time, the cron on the back end of WordPress is what takes care of actually publishing that post at the time that you thought of. Or so if I want to say I want to publish a post tomorrow at 9 o'clock, cron will be like, oh, this post needs to be published. Let's go do that. Or if I schedule an email to send out at tomorrow at 5, cron's going to say, hey, these emails are scheduled to send out now. Let's do that at 5 o'clock. So that's what cron is. I'm
pronouncing correctly, don't it's my Englishness, isn't it? Yeah.
We have a process that guides users through the process of setting up a cron job, which is what actually makes the request to WordPress to perform all of the scheduled actions. We recommend that you set up on 1-minute intervals. You can do that for free using a service called cronjob.org, which is really, really, really awesome, and I highly recommend it. And that's kind of like our default
That's the
recommendation for
external
users.
service, isn't it? So
Yeah.
you would recommend utilizing the external service?
I would recommend using an external service, because one of the benefits of that is they actually send you notifications if stuff stops working. So, for example, if your website's down, that means the cron job will fail, and then you'll get an email saying, "Hey, listen, your cron job's not working for whatever reason." So it has that kind of added benefit. It also removes a point of failure, right? So, or it adds a second point of failure, rather.
How hard is this to do? Can the average intelligent owner, user, DIY person
Absolutely
be able to do this?
Yes, we have lots of guides, we have lots of videos, and we have lots of step-by-step documentation in order to help with this process.
And do you feel it really is worth it? It will make the experience of using Groundhog a lot better.
It'll make the experience of using WordPress in general a lot better. So without using an external cron job, WordPress tries to make that process happen on its own. So that means when you load a page, right, it sends an additional request. So when you go to the website, when you go to WordPress, it sends an additional request to the cron file on WordPress. Excuse me. And this makes or this doubles your website load for that visit, right? So I'll repeat that. So if someone comes to your website and you don't have an external cron job set up, that means WordPress has to send a request to the cron on its own, which means so they have one request for visiting and viewing that page, and it sends an additional request. So this means for every visitor, you have 2 requests to your website. So that's essentially doubling website load for the number of visitors that you have. So if you all of a sudden have a huge surge of traffic that your web host is not capable of handling for whatever reason, then you can basically say, kiss your website goodbye and hello 503 errors. Not fun. So I would highly recommend that you set up an external cron service, because this means that cron is consistent. You will receive at most 1 request per minute. And if we do the math on that, right? So 1 request per minute. So that means 60 requests an hour. And you want to do that times 24. That means you're at most getting like 1,400 requests per day, which is like totally fine. If you're multiplying that by like 30 days in a month, that means you basically have pseudo 43,000 site visitors, and which most hosts can churn out with their eyes closed, right? So non-issue.
Right, I think we'll wrap it up, and I think next week we'll talk about the SaaS competition in a way to native systems like yourself. What are some of their weaknesses, strengths, the differences between the different services? I think you're the right person to ask, because I'm sure you've looked at them all in great depth. And I think our listeners and viewers will get great value from that. Thank you so much, Adrian. I think that's been a fantastic discussion. And we'll see you next week, folks, with another WP Tonic show. See you soon, folks. Bye.